All the major technical pieces are done. We're still, until it ships, we're going to be going through space and performance optimization on there, but all of the big question plays are pretty much resolved. But of course, the difference between a good game and a great game, or a spectacular landmark game, is all the stuff that happens at the very end of the development. Because if you stop a game development too soon, or you don't put that final level of polish in, then you get just another set of games that, the hundreds of games that come out, maybe look pretty or whatever, but to reach that level of being something that people are going to deeply love, that they're going to want to play over again, that they're going to remember, that they're going to talk about, the special games that we've done so many times in the past, that's where all the work that we've got to do now is. The work that I'm doing now is not in writing new technical subsystems, things like that. It's down to the point of working on picky stuff, like our resource management, to make sure that we fit on the things, that we're reliable and fast between levels, working on tiny little user interface things, like making sure that there's absolutely minimal latency possible between the time you press something on the joystick, something happens on the screen. One of the things that I still argue with lots of people over is trying to make sure that all the user interface stuff is clearly legible, because I know it's horribly ironic for a graphics programmer to have horrible eyesight, but I have a hard time reading lots of tiny text, so I'm always the one in there telling the designers and graphic artists that, okay, this needs to be bigger, things like this. An interesting point on that where it was actually just a couple weeks ago, Robert Duffy, the lead programmer, was commenting how, because I harp on this all the time, so he brought this to my attention on there, where when he played Fallout 3 first on the PS3, he thought, this is pretty good, but when he played it on his PC, he found that he enjoyed it so much more just because everything was immediately legible. And while it's true that lots of you are younger and probably have better eyesight, but for those of us that are aging and deteriorating a little bit on there, there's much to be said for making sure that you sacrifice a little bit of artistic, aesthetic design on there just to make sure that you can actually read all the information that you're trying to convey. So I still have battles yet to be fought on some of the rage design on that. But then all the little things that we've gone through that we know how to do in other projects. We've gone through and tuned games before where the dozens of little things you do that everybody here has played first-person shooters that just don't have the right feel. Maybe it looks okay, but something's missing there. And the punch of the weapons, the feedback of attacking the enemies. And you can make lists of all of the things that contribute to this. And there are so many of them. I mean, there's the obvious things about what happens with the animation, the sound, the muzzle flash, the ejecting brass, the kick of the view head, the response of the enemy character there, the particles that come off, the haze that fills up, the things that explode in the room, the marks that you leave on the walls, and you can go on and on and on about these are all of the ingredients that get stirred into a really gripping game experience. And we are in the process of tuning all of these things. That part's not done yet on Rage. And we're still arguing over things about how you choose to select weapons, whether you wind up having dashes versus crouches, and how you lay all that stuff out. We have started our first little bit of user testing on here, working with EA to go ahead and take random people, starting them through, giving them tasks, and we are going to do a better, more rigorous job at this than we ever have on our previous projects. Certainly, you don't want to let testers design your game for you. I mean, that is a trap that you can fall into, where you have to have your vision of what you want to do and then sculpt it with the feedback that they have from there. You don't want to design by committee and just say, everybody write down your suggestions of what's going to make the most awesome game, because that doesn't work out. You have to have some kind of guiding style and focus there. But what we do really want to watch is when people sit down there, what do they have trouble with? Do they constantly overshoot here? Can they not figure out how to do something? Is this not working well for them? And there's still a lot of debate over some of that stuff, like quintessential FPS gameplay questions about, with the mouse and keyboard, things are so much nicer. But when we consider that the majority of people that will play this game will be playing it on a gamepad, you have to think about things. It's like, okay, do you want to give them complete freedom of movement and help by aiming the gun, or do you want to tend their view towards things and make it a nonlinear feedback? And there's all sorts of picky things there. And then even when you get down to much lower level things, like an interesting thing that I did like a month ago or so was I set up tiny little things like the ramp of what fraction over you are on the joypad equaling what speed and sensitivity. And these are things that there are not clearly correct answers for. It's what feels better, what can people be a little bit more accurate with. And like I made some subtle change in there, and every person that tested it thought it was marginally better. And these are tiny things. They're subtle, almost subliminal things. But it actually makes me want to look at something like that and say, you know, it would be great if we had almost a mini game or something that just tested that thing, and then we could use like an evolving genetic algorithm to piece together different control ramps to kind of find the optimal first-person aiming ramp on there. So there's lots of stuff yet to be done on turning Rage from something it's to the point where it's awesome. It looks great. Everybody should take a look at Tim and Matt running through it. We've been showing it to some press yesterday and earlier today, and this will be a live Tim and Matt up there with game controllers playing it. God, I hope it doesn't crash. Whenever you get up there and do that in front of a whole bunch of people, you run that risk early on. But we have to cover it in quality at this point. It has to turn out and have no gaping holes, because so much of what games are today, games are awesome today. I mean, the whole field, we have great competitors, we have awesome peers making good games here, and you have to have your hook, you have to have your thing that you do better than the other people, but there's so much stuff that you have to be just as good as everybody else has, and you have to make sure that you don't do anything that looks stupid. And that's, the more aggressive you get in your scope, for years, id Software avoided doing people because it's so easy to make people look stupid. Zombies are great. You don't care if they look stupid because their brains are damaged. That's a great excuse. And some of the, that's great game design when you think about it. You want to pick your battles in such a way that the things that you don't think you're all that good at, you minimize. But of course, Rage is a people game. We have deep characters, lots of stuff going on in there, huge amounts of work going in on the animation and art side to make these characters really, they're not generic stand-in guy here that gives you your weapons. These are people with characters that you're interested in. They have great voice talents behind them. The animation, facial work, all this stuff is really good, far better than anything we've ever done before. But that's still one of my deep worries, is that I have noticed myself many times recently just feeling very happy with the state of the game, where I've got it sitting there on my monitor and I'm looking at it, and you've got some dust blowing around, the foliage waving, everything looking awesome, shadowing looking great, character walks by, everything is just looking fabulous, running at 60 frames per second, and then like the IK screws up a little bit and he jiggles up and down a couple times. I'm like, damn it, we have to root out all of those things, because you can look so good, and then you just have like one little misstep in there, and it can really take it down a notch. And I'm not yet clear if we're going to be able to get all of those things out. Now, people forgive games a lot. If you're enjoying the game, its faults become character to some degree. It's not the things that you'll really bitch and complain about. But if somebody's on the fence about a game, or if their first experience with it is something like that, that can set a bad tone. And one thing that we've done with Rage that we always wanted to do in previous titles and usually didn't is we've actually saved the very first level to be the last one built, so that there's pros and cons to that. The pro is that everybody knows exactly what they're doing. By the time we get to this point in it, the artists, designers, programmers, everybody knows what they're doing, and it can probably be some of the best stuff in the game. The con is that it hurts you when you're doing testing, because you have to, instead of saying, here's the start of the game, pretend you just unwrapped it and stuck it into your console, you have to say, all right, here's the setup, here's where you are in the game, this is what you're supposed to have learned. And that's a little bit of a drawback. So one of the remaining parts that we haven't done yet is the very first part of the game, and I'm hoping that we get to that pretty quickly so we can start running people through from the beginning and see how far they get and really kind of learn that whole gameplay experience. But overall, at this point, I'm very happy with how Rage is looking as a project, not just visually. And there are we may still have problems fitting onto the split DVDs for the 360. There's still questions about exactly what the multiplayer component of it is. There are some significant things to still be developed there. But Rage as a product, it's going to come out, it's going to exist, it's going to be really good. We still have to put in that whole final crunch effort to make sure that it goes from just really good